Welcome to episode 3 of the Your Business and You chat show, and I am here with Phil Fraser, and we are in Nerja in Spain. So I have been trying to get together with Phil for a few weeks because he wasn't even on my radar. We'll come to that story later on as part of this, but Phil wrote an amazing piece about the difference between business mentoring and business coaching, which is, anybody that knows me, is one of my soapbox subjects, because actually a business coach and a business mentor is something very different. So I am here to chat to Phil today about the piece that he wrote and the difference between mentoring. But first, Phil, tell us a little bit about Your Business and You and where we are in this beautiful sunshine.
Okay, so we're in beautiful Nerja, south of Spain, 45 minutes northeast of Malaga. I'm fortunate enough to own a property out here, and Tina's come along today, especially to interview me. I spent 18 years launching, growing, scaling, and eventually selling a business. And now work as what I call a business sounding board, which is sort of halfway between a business coach and a business mentor. I work with SME owners to help them not to be lonely at the top. Anybody who owns their own business will be fully aware of that lonely at the top feeling of, yeah, it's great running your own business because you can make all your own decisions and decide what to do and what not to do. The downside is exactly that sometimes you end up not doing the stuff you don't want to do. You know, I compare it to sort of pushing a cold piece of broccoli around the plate. You know you should do it, but you don't do it. And other times having to make really big decisions and actually not having anybody to discuss that with and say, look, could you just listen to me? Does this sound really stupid? Is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? I've got 3 ideas, which is the best one? Or I've got a problem with a member of staff, or I've got, there's positive things. I've got this great opportunity, I don't know how to maximize it. So I'm there to be a pair of ears, an extra pair of eyes. People sometimes call it a helicopter view, just to help a business owner be a better business owner. Yeah,
and I think I refer to it, so everything that I do is about ensuring the well-being of the business, and the business owner is as good as it can be. And that's a micro business, somebody that employs 0 to 9 with an annual turnover of no more than 2 million. That's what the definition of a micro business is in the UK. So Phil works with businesses at the next stage to...
There's actually having said that, there is a crossover. I tend to target businesses, probably half a dozen staff, 500,000 turnover upwards to maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 million. So there's a crossover at the bottom end and some work at the top end.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us, and we were talking about this. I was talking about this on last week's episode with Michael Edwards from the Northern Affinity about that collaboration, and actually how forward-thinking people will look at the opportunities to collaborate. And I think this, for me, is where Phil and I are here chatting today, where I absolutely loved the article that he wrote that I've shared with a number of people. But a lot of what I do, beyond ensuring the well-being of the business and the business owner is as good as it can be, is look at thoughts, fears and great ideas. Because when you come to chatting to business owners, you find that they've got recurring thoughts. It's like, oh, keep having this thought. I think I've got this great idea. What do I do with it? And then I've got this great big fear that's hanging over me and stops me from driving it forward. So I think what you do, Phil, as a sounding board is great, because actually your thoughts, it's back to those thoughts, fears and great ideas. But in relation to the coach stroke mentor conversation, do you want to just share a little bit about how you some of what you wrote in the article, if you can remember. I've had a glass of wine, Phil's had a couple of small beers. So I'm hoping we're making sense, because of course that's really important that we are. But can you So can you remember what you wrote in that article? And
Okay.
I know I've got one or two people that are probably going to be listening to this and going, Tina, we can tell you what he said.
Okay. So I think one of the reasons I wrote it was actually for some clarity for me as well as for other people. And my start point was exactly what we discussed earlier, which is some people say, I'm looking for a coach or a mentor. And the first question after that is, which is it you want? Now, a lot of the time, people actually don't know whether they want a coach or a mentor. And sometimes actually it's irrelevant whether they call themselves a coach or a mentor. But I think to help decide which one you need, you almost need to start with, as with most things, what is it you're trying to do? So if, for example, you want to become a better public speaker or you want to be a better salesperson, you would in that scenario go to a coach. Because a coach, in my definition, and then search on the internet, there's a million different definitions. In my definition, a coach is somebody who increases your skill at a certain thing.
Yeah.
And like I say, it might be sales, it might be presentations, there's all sorts of different things. A mentor is more a guide who helps you develop your skills yourself.
Yeah.
So the best example I use, we talked about football earlier, we're both Leeds fans. Marcelo Bielsa, you're not a Leeds fan, are you?
No, I am. I am because I have no choice in my house.
Okay, well, there you go.
I have to be a Leeds fan. It's like a compulsory.
Okay, so as a Leeds example, and I know he's gone, but we all still love him, Marcelo Bielsa is a coach. He improves the players to become better players. If you were looking for a mentor in that scenario, you might be a striker and you might sit and talk with Gary Lineker.
Yeah.
As a mentor, because Gary Lineker will say, well, this is how it played out for me, this is what I did, these are the things I did, and these are the sort of directions you're going to go in. He would be a mentor, whereas Bielsa would be a coach.
Yeah.
I think with a mentor as well, what you are doing with that mentor when you utilise a mentor as well as you can is you're plugging into all those years of experience where they can recognise the situation you're in and not necessarily give you the answer, but can guide you to find the way forward.
Yeah.
Whereas a coach will say, okay, we've identified this deficiency, and these are the prerequisite steps you have to go through to improve that skill or deficiency to become better at it. And probably the other real difference in my mind is coaching will have much clearer waypoints. So you can see I started at this point, I ended up at this point. And those of us who've been on all sorts of different training courses will know that. You know, in many situations you start the training course with, okay, in whatever way you do it, let's identify where you're at, and at the end of the training course we can identify where you've got to, and you've got that measured, hopefully, improvement.
Yeah.
Whereas a mentor is probably a bit more blurred and a bit more ephemeral, that you can't actually say, I was here, I'm there now. There will be aspects of it,
Yeah.
because you'll say, oh, before we got together I was doing this, or I was thinking this way, or I was working at this system, and now I'm doing it better. But you know, we've all been on training courses where we get our little certificate, say I've passed whatever training course it might be. You don't do that with a mentoring. Mentoring also is probably more open-ended, that there isn't definitely a fixed timeline on it. Whereas a coach, and coaches may argue this is not the case, but coaches may say, well, this is a 6 weeks training course, or a 10-week training course, or a year training course, however long it might be.
Yeah.
Has a fixed time. Whereas mentoring tends to have a flexibility about it that probably determined by the mentee, that they will get to the point where they go, okay, I've got what I wanted out of this relationship. Whereas probably the other side of it, the coach is more right, well, that's the box, that's the package, we've got to the end. And this goes all the way round back to what we started with, which is, what are you trying to do?
And I do think that's important, because I know with people that I mentor, and as part of the Micro Business Mentor Club, I'm working on sort of a 12-month programme. Now, if people choose beyond that to stay subscribing, I would expect them to probably, it's not compulsory, but they would be part of that club for 12 months. And in that 12 months, I'm working through different stages of their business. And at the end of that 12 months, I would expect them to probably say, Tina, I feel like I've done this. It might be that they want a more focused mentor. But I think the one thing for me that with the article that you wrote that really struck home was a mentor is somebody that's walked the walk. And that is where I feel quite passionately, and I've used it a lot. This guy, Phil Fraser, who I wanted an article that was written in the way that I would deliver it, about the business coach versus business mentor. And it was while I was working on a local authority funded programme, a City of York programme, because I do quite a lot of that type of stuff to add value to business support. And I had a lot of people coming to me. They could get the grant, they could then spend it on business professional services. And they'd say, I want a coach or a mentor. And I would say, what do you want? Do you want a coach or do you want a mentor? And I thought, I'm going to have to find an article that I can share. So I searched the internet. I found this article written by this guy. Turns out he's from Leeds. And us Yorkshire folk have to stick together. I had Michael last week as my guest. I had Andrew the week before. It's like West Yorkshire Men Month is May. But I was really, really pleased with this article. I loved the way Phil had written it. And the number of people that said to me, I can't believe you don't know Phil Fraser. I can't believe that you do all you do, Tina. And then he did a podcast with Deborah Ogden. And what was it I said? I didn't even know you existed.
I didn't even know you existed.
And here I am in Nurka now, because I wanted to meet up with him. I wanted to take him for lunch, and he said, oh no, I can't do that because I'm going to Spain. And then I discovered that he was in the same part of Spain as I was, so here we are. So yeah, I think if you are looking for that coach mentor relationship, it is very, very important. So tell us a little bit, excuse the noise. This is real, people. This is real. Phil, tell us a little bit about your background, your business, and you, and what your business was and how you developed it, because this is all about your business and you. It's that well-being of the business and the business owner, which you obviously help others look at their well-being now.
Okay, so the short version of the story, because we could go on for hours with the long story.
We've only got...
Yeah, keep it short.
Yeah.
I back in 2000, so a long time ago, tried to pitch for funding for what would have been the UK's first pay-to-play online bingo site. Okay, so I went out proper Dragon's Den style to real people to try and get some money for this venture, which failed completely. Nobody backed us at all. We got no money whatsoever. However, what I'd done is I built a very basic website which listed all the American bingo sites that were out there, because they were the only people in the market. And on it, I'd put a very simple pop-up questionnaire to get some data about age, demographics, spend, frequency, that sort of thing, of bingo players, so that when I did my presentation, I at least sounded like I knew what I was talking about. What happened was a number of the bingo sites that were listed on our website, or this basic website, contacted me and said, can we advertise on your website? Now, fortunately, my background was selling advertising space, so I worked on newspapers, magazines. Those of you a certain age will remember Just 17.
Oh yeah, I do. Actually, did you notice how he looked at me when he said
I sold advertising on Just 17, as well as Yellow Pages and all sorts of places. So when they started saying to me, can we advertise on your website? I thought, actually, I still have a basic understanding of this sector. Let's go for it. And that website became the business. So we ended up being the TripAdvisor for online bingo, both in the US and then eventually in the UK. So it was a comparison website. We listed every single online bingo website in the UK. At its peak, there were over 400 of them. So every single one was on our website. So you could read reviews, you could get special offers, players could leave reviews. It was simply an advertising model. part of it was an affiliate advertising model, part of it was just normal advertising sales. And we grew and grew this business. It started on the kitchen table by accident with no funding whatsoever. We took 5 years before we got to the really scary decision of taking on staff and an office, which at the time is just petrifying, because when it's your own business, when you're running a micro business, when you're running your own business, if it doesn't go well, it's like, hey, it doesn't really matter. Once you've got staff, I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm responsible for paying their mortgages and their rent, and oh my God, their children won't have anything to eat and they'll have no shoes and all that sort of thing. So it's really scary when we took on our first member of staff, and we grew and grew and grew. Long story, and 18 years later from launching by accident, we sold to a PLC.
Which is, I mean, it's like you probably didn't imagine it being the business that it was, which you said you set up something and you pitched it, and what you pitched wasn't what you wanted. You grew it from your kitchen table. I absolutely understand what you're saying about taking on staff, because one of the key things for me is when I have a micro business comes to me, a micro business owner, and says, Tina, I need to take on my first member of staff. And I say to them, what you must do is you must look at what you have to pay them and think about the fact that you might actually not be able to pay yourself because you're paying them. Because there are, it is this roller coaster, isn't it? It's like an absolute, but there comes a point where you have to stand on the edge of that diving board and take that leap of faith. But my goodness, when it comes to your business and you and that whole anxiety and your well-being and the well-being of your business, it's a real, and you must have had, having chatted to you and Jane, you must have had, your girls were?
When we started, the girls were sort of 5 and 7, something like that.
Right.
Trying to get my dates right.
Yeah,
about 4, 5, 6,
girls,
7.
if you're watching, your dad does know how old you are.
They don't watch. They will
don't
never
watch.
ever.
That's
oh,
right.
another
We're
podcast,
safe.
Dad. I'm not listening to that.
Dad's on another video. It's fine. But I think there is all of that, and I do think we come to. There are milestones in our life when we make these decisions that we are going to do something differently.
Yeah.
So I'm presuming you moved from the corporate world, did you? Was that a move from the corporate world to set up this kitchen table business, or? No,
what happened was, so just going back to the taking on your first member of staff, we were given some advice which stuck with me, and it sounds very, very cold, and it's not meant to be. And this was from a business advisor when we were deciding whether to sort of carry on what we're doing or taking staff in office. And he said, actually, if you take somebody on as staff, you might think, do the simple maths. You take somebody on for 24 grand a year or 36 grand a year. You might think, oh shit, I'm in for 24 grand. Actually, you're only in for 1 month's salary. That's the risk. That's all the risk is, because they're on 1 month's notice.
Yeah.
So it's not 24 grand salary that's the risk. You're actually risking £2,000 every month, or £3,000 if it's 36 grand, and that made it a lot easier for us. And that's not meant to be cold-hearted and hire and fire them or anything like that. It's just it's another way of looking at what looks like shit. Where do we get 36 grand from? Where actually you're actually saying each month you're saying, can we afford 3 grand?
Yeah.
It's a completely different way of looking at it. But just going back to how I got to where I got to, I'd spent 6 or 7 years selling advertising space, a couple of intermittent, I did a bit of recruitment consultancy as well, and ended up at a brilliant advertising agency in Leeds called Brahm, which ended up being called Brass. People may have heard of them. Absolutely brilliant company. And then left them because I wanted to go client side, and at the time this newfangled thing called the internet had come along.
Ooh.
And I thought, might be something in this, might be an opportunity,
Might
work, but to cover myself, I'll go to a big corporate who has an internet arm, so I'm sort of hedging my bets, you see. So I ended up at William Hill and launched their first ever online casino.
Right, okay.
Which is where we came across the concept of online bingo. I did a presentation to the board of William Hill about online bingo. At the time they decided not to do it, which is fair enough. I ended up leaving the company at the end of the year, was doing some consultancy work, and sort of dusted this idea down and thought, well, actually this might work. So sort of changed it around a bit, made it into a business plan, put some projections together, and that sort of goes back to where we started, which is when I went out to pitch this brilliant business which nobody wanted because I was too early. I didn't realise I wasn't a brilliant futurologist or anything like that. I was 5 years too early before it actually arrived in the UK.
And it's really interesting because there's quite a number of people that I know that I've got to know quite well as part of all that I've done with micro business support, and that were about 5 years too early for what they've done.
Yep.
And you know, I'll probably have some of them as guests on future episodes, but it was this: I was 5 years too early, I was 7 years too early. But what they managed to do was change. Well, some of them managed to change it into something positive that sort of they could move forward, and some of them found themselves in a situation where, not failed, because I hate using the terminology failed. It didn't work as was planned.
Yeah.
So I suppose, and in relation to that, going out on your own, and did you do it as we're going into this, we're going to take all these risks, or did you do it as a side hustle where you were also still consulting?
It was
side hustle, whether you like the term
side hustle. Yeah, you've got to use the phrase side hustle. At the time,
pivot. They're very good ones.
Yeah, I pivoted to a side hustle.
Yeah.
All right,
Oh, wow.
we've said all the right words now.
You are so on trend.
So at the time I was doing some consultancy work because I'd worked in online gaming for a year, so I was an expert, bearing in mind that online gaming was very, very new at the time. I was also doing some freelance training work, going back at my old ad agency, doing some presentation skills courses and stuff like that. But at the same time, so this thing was sort of bubbling along as a side hustle, but I was still looking for a proper job. And I got offered a job in a digital agency in Leeds. Very nice job, account director, car, salary, the whole thing. And on the Friday before the Monday I was due to start, I went in to see them and said, sorry, I can't take this job. I've got this thing that's happening that could turn into something big. And that was a huge sliding doors moment in my life. Because I could have quite easily taken the job, you know, I said, young kids, you know, all that sort of thing. Stupidity, naivety. I think looking back at it, there was a bit of self-belief in that, okay, if this idea does go south and we make nothing out of it, I could probably find myself another job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And often that is the case, actually, that, and somebody said this a few weeks ago on a podcast, and I absolutely love it, is actually, if you look at what's the worst that could happen, and you look at what's the best that could happen, in the vast majority of cases, it is so imbalanced towards the best that could happen that it's almost stupid not to do it.
Yeah.
When you look at things like, oh, okay, so all right, I'm not a brain surgeon, I'm not going to kill somebody or anything like that. If the idea doesn't work, all right, we might have to dip into our savings, or we might have to sell the car, or it's not a life and death situation. And I backed myself to get another job. So the upside was this huge business opportunity, although I didn't see it at the time. The downside was, all right, I look a bit stupid in 6 months' time turning down a really, really nice job.
Yeah. But there are other ones out there.
But there are other ones out there, and if you're half decent at anything, it's all right. It's easy for me to say that now, but if you're half decent at anything, you could normally sort yourself out a job.
And I come at it from a slightly different angle, because I'm third generation self-employed, and was in the family business, mum and dad's business, before I bought my first business, which was a property lettings and management business with my mum when I was 21. And then what happened was there was this whole economic crash. Interest rates were 16.5%. There was repossessions, there was redundancies, there was all sorts of stuff that we've experienced in a recent economic crash. And so you realise how old you are when you start to ride that roller coaster of economic crash. And but for me, the self-employment thing was always something that was going to happen. And then I did it in reverse, and I had a really bad self-employed retail experience at the end of my 30s that my accountant told me I should have gone bankrupt, and my pride wouldn't allow me to do it. So what happened was I sold the business and took an employed job, as some might refer to it, a proper job.
Proper job.
Because of course being self-employed isn't necessarily a proper job.
That's
but
not a proper job, Tina.
That's not a proper job. Well, that's a whole nother episode. But yeah, I went into employment and I couldn't do it. I just had run my own businesses. I'd built my own businesses, whether they'd been a success or not a success. I'd employed staff. And what I realised then was that it was that period that made me realise that I wanted to go into business support to help others, because what I realised with some of the organisations that I was either not necessarily working in but working alongside, I could see the problems that they were having, and that, so as I chatted to you earlier, micro business, micro social enterprise, micro charities, and I ended up working with them. But it was that employed period that made me realise that I had so much to offer, and then you know it's where life takes you and how you do it. But I am a risk taker. So you talk about the terminology entrepreneur, which I think is seriously overused. It's got used in the wrong terminology, because actually an entrepreneur is somebody that starts something for risk or reward. And, you know, that's what we've
Sorry,
done.
I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
And there is Siri having Siri say in what Phil and I do. You see, this is it. I'm not going to be editing it. It's live. It's live. So, yeah, I suppose before we finish, because Phil and I have just been chatting about the optimum length of time for a podcast or a video like this, and it is about 30 minutes, because apparently that is the average commute. So we better not overrun, or you'll be switching us off before you get there.
Or you've arrived at the office.
Or you've arrived at the office and you're like, oh, well, I'll listen to them later and never get round to it. What would be your one top tip for a business owner who is thinking of getting a coach or a mentor?
I think the top tip, we said it right at the start, is try to identify what it is you're trying to do, and that will determine where you end up with finding a coach or finding a business mentor. I'd suggest you go out there and ask for referrals from other people as well. It's far too easy nowadays for people to call themselves a coach by reading a book or buying a franchise. No names.
No.
But yeah, try referral, try somebody who's been there and done it. But firstly, identify what it is you're trying to do. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I think that's really important as well. And the other thing that I would say to you is, if you find that person that you are working with isn't suitable for you, don't be afraid of walking away and looking for somebody else. You do not have to stay with them. In fact, it is not good for your mentor-coach relationship if you are not benefiting from it as well. Phil, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
And I look forward to chatting some more. Now I know who you are.
And where I live.
And where you live.